Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is returning to the show. He's Dr. Michael Waters. He's here to celebrate Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip. Hey, Dr. Michael, welcome back to the Reading with Your Kids podcast.
I'm so delighted to be back. Thank you so much.
Also here today to co-host the episode and also to kick it off is my extraordinarily talented intern from Emerson College, Justina Thompson. Hey, Justina.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Jed. I'm so excited to be here. Can you tell us a little bit about the book first? And then also, can you tell us about what attracted you to telling this story?
Well, sure. Well, one of the greatest inspirations in my life are our children. And the youngest before this last December, my wife and I welcomed a baby boy this past December, but our youngest prior to that was our baby girl named Liberty. And I have led civil rights pilgrimages to the Deep South since 2005. And in 2018, had the opportunity to lead several faith leaders from the Dallas area on a pilgrimage through the Deep South as a part of the 50th year commemoration of the death of Martin Luther King Jr. And two of us, my dear friend and brother, Imam Dr. Omar Suleiman, and our family, we brought our children with us. And I've taken all types of persons to the Deep South, college students, retirees, but never had in such abundance young people. And I was struck by the way in which they interacted with sometimes very painful and challenging history. They entered into these spaces with an openness, with an awareness of the experience, but also were able to seed in this great hope. And that hope for me became very transformational. And really that became the inspiration for this book, that as we remember parts of our very difficult past, we can still seed in hope so that together we can create a better future. And so it's my attempt to see our trip through the eyes of our then youngest and dear friend Abdullah. And thank you so much. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Can you expand a little bit more about the kids' reactions when you're in these different cities, different, places where history, as you said, sometimes very painful history happened. What was their reaction hearing those stories?
Well, you know what? I'll never forget being in Birmingham, Alabama, in Kelly Ingram Park. And if you ever see the old footage of the Birmingham struggle, Kelly Ingram Park is a place where water hoses and canines were released against young people. And across the street is the 16th Street Baptist Church, where unfortunately 4 little girls lost their lives. And a dear friend of mine lost eyesight in one of her eyes after that bombing. And so while we were there in the church with everyone, including these young people, including Liberty, they were greatly concerned that such harm would come upon people, particularly in a house of worship. And that created a conversation about the harm that unfortunately continues today, as you've seen persons harmed in mosques and synagogues and churches. And so they were really concerned about that, didn't turn away from that very painful history. And yet, as we departed from there and went across the street, was amazed to see their joy, their running around, their climbing trees in a place and space that generations before had brought such pain and harm. And that's what I mean about transforming these spaces. At every place we went, although oftentimes there is this very painful history, the presence of these young people not only transforms the space, but it also shows you the effectiveness of the struggle, that those who are willing to give so much in their day did, in fact, make things better, even though we have a lot of work left to do. And so they became a bridge in many ways, these children, my kids and the others, for the work that has been done before us, but the work that we must continue to do to secure for them an even better future.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful message. And I love, and just want to repeat what you said, things, because of the sacrifices that were made generations ago, things are better, but we do still have a lot of work to do to make sure that everybody that our country can live up to the promise that was made when the country was founded, that everybody has the right to liberty in the pursuit of happiness, not just a select few.
And I think that's the tension in which we live in. The recognition, and I think it's very important to recognize it. I know and have very good friends who were participants in the Civil Rights Movement. I had the opportunity when he was living to sit with Congressperson John Lewis and share with him. I've had a chance to sit in conversation with Andrew Young and others, Jesse Jackson. And it's important to recognize their sacrifices. Amelia Boynton Robinson, Vera Harris, I can keep calling their names. I mean, they gave so much, and what they did in their time did make a difference. Can't fail to acknowledge that. But at the same time, we can't rest on our laurels and act like everything is fine now, or that there aren't forces that are seeking to take us back in time in some regards. We have to see the work we must do in our own day. Coretta Scott King said, and I'll paraphrase, that basically every generation has a responsibility to take on the mantle and pursue justice. Every single generation has an opportunity to make things better. And through this book and through the eyes of my children and other kids that were involved, I had the opportunity to see not only the successes and the sacrifices and have an even greater point of honor for those who made those sacrifices, but I also felt compelled more so than ever before to make sure that we are making the sacrifices and doing the work in our day so that we can hand them over something far better than we have now, so that they can, in fact, continue to advance it and make the world a better place.
What can you say to somebody who might be listening to this, maybe someone like me, an old white guy, almost 100 years old, who sits back and says, hey, I haven't hurt anybody. I've friends and I've tried, and why should this worry me? Why should this cause be important for me? Why should I join in this fight?
Well, Dr. King said it best, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that what harms someone directly harms others indirectly. And you might think that, I've been saved from this experience. I've not been impacted by the negativity that's happening in some places within our country and our world. But then I would beg you to question, to really look deeply, particularly think about how this pandemic has harmed all of us and how it has created the greatest wealth disparity in the history of our nation. That's something that touches everyone. Let's think about the fact that we are less healthy as a community if some of our neighbors don't have access to health care, and that how important it is to make sure that our neighbors have access to health care and to healthy foods and to technology, because in reality, that keeps all of us safe and to make sure that we're all thriving. I would call someone, or I would question for them to step back and ask themselves, am I really not impacted, or have I been unaware of the ways that I have been impacted, even if it's just an impact of the heart? I don't know of anyone of goodwill who can tolerate, who can condone knowing that there are persons within their own communities, across the street or even across town, that are going to bed without food to eat in one of the most prosperous nations in the world, the most prosperous nation in the world. And so those are conversations that I've actually had, and usually putting it in that way, that we have this responsibility to each other to make sure that our basic needs are provided for, and even, I believe, to press beyond simply our basic needs to the point of thriving, because surely there's enough space in place at this human table for all of us human beings to live and thrive together. And frankly, not just human beings, but we have a responsibility to creation at large to make sure that as we are living and thriving, that the entire creation, animals and trees, everyone is living and thriving together.
Yeah, I know, Dr. Michael, that you are a pastor in addition to being a civil rights advocate and an author. And one of the things that I have gotten from reading the Bible and the words of Jesus was, he repeated throughout his teachings, be not afraid, be not afraid. And I think that's one of the things that drives so much of the division that exists between peoples, not only people here in the United States, but people in the United States, and divides us from our brothers and sisters on other continents, is this fear that there's not going to be enough for me and my family.
Well, that's that theology of scarcity, which does create that fear, when in fact we have plenty. There's more than enough, again, for everyone to have what they need and for us to thrive. But it does require us to have a greater vision of the world than we have possessed so far. And I think this book, Liberty Civil Rights Road Trip, which again is based on a true story, one of the things that captivates me about that experience is persons who read the book, they recognize that this was an intergenerational, multi-faith, multiracial, multi-gendered experience through the Deep South. People of all backgrounds traveling together on a bus, visiting these sites of transformational sacrifice and committing ourselves to do the same, being led in many ways by children. And I can't help but think about the words of Jesus that a child shall lead them. There's something very powerful concerning the inquisitive minds and truth-telling of young people that I find transformational. And, the young people that were with us, Liberty, oftentimes, and you'll see this captioned in the book, she will call a thing, right? With mince words. When we're outside where a bombing takes place, they call that evil. They say that that's bad, and we should say that. There's no reason we ought to excuse that. But even in those spaces, they still find hope. I'll never forget being in in Montgomery this time, on the front porch where Dr. King lived at the Dexter Avenue parsonage. And Liberty and Abdullah knelt on the porch beside a crater that remains there that was left by a stick of dynamite. And to see these children place their hands in this crater and outline the crater with their fingers. We just kind of watched them as they were working. It was as if they were healing the space. It was as if they were redeeming that space for something good. And I think that's the power of children. Children have that capacity to redeem spaces and to cause us to see the possibilities beyond the initial harm. That was such a beautiful and transformational experience for me. For them to say, yes, a very bad and evil thing happened here, but look at us, we're all together. Look at us, we're still believing for something greater, and surely we can accomplish it together.
What a beautiful picture you painted. Justina, I know we were talking before the interview, there was a quote, a specific quote in the book that moved you. Can you share that with Dr. Michael?
Of course. So the quote that I'm going to be talking about, it's towards the end of Liberty's journey when she's in Selma and everyone's marching across the bridge. And it reads, maybe this is what love looks like too. And I think that really touched me. And of course it comes from Liberty. And I just wanted to ask you, if you don't mind, can you share your thoughts on what you believe love should look like in a world today, especially with young, impressionable children that obviously see things and learn from the things that they see? What do you think love should look like in a world today?
Wow. I'll say this. I think it was Cornel West that said that justice is what love looks like in public. So when I think about what love should look like, I think it looks like a world free of cages for children. I think that love looks like a world free from bombs raining down upon children. I think it's a world where everyone is fed, everyone is sheltered, where health care is a human right. To me, that's what love is, because that looks like justice. It's an opportunity where we are sharing all things in kind, as it were, meaning that we won't allow anyone in our community or circle of influence to go hungry or to be pained. It means treating each other amazingly as we would like ourselves to be treated, and having a love and compassion for neighbor that I think is also rooted for me personally in the Gospels, to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and our neighbor as ourselves. To me, that's what love looks like. Love looks like justice in public and making sure that we have done right to other people. I believe we can get there. And I think that's a part of our heritage. You know, the abolitionists didn't wait for the end of chattel slavery to believe in a world where there was no longer slavery. The persons who were working to desegregate our country didn't wait for Jim Crow to come down before they started working and believing and seeing those realities. I think it's far too late to have to see it before you work for it. And maybe it's that love that we all have the capacity to possess that causes us not only to see something better than we have right now, but to commit with all of our heart, soul, and mind to make it to be.
That's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And I love that you believe that we can make that happen. As you're speaking, I'm thinking that Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip would be such a beautiful book for a family to read, because we're always talking about how parents can help their kids open up their eyes through the pages of kids' books. There are certain books that I think kids can help their parents' eyes be open. And I think this is one of those books, because I think, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about today, about justice, about treating others the way we want to be treated, simple, you know, a simple lesson that has been a part of every faith throughout history. For a kid to be able to sit down and at the end of Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip, turn to their parents and go, yeah, that's what I want. And, you know, and help the parents shed that, yeah, but I need this and I need that. And if they have this, I won't have that. And just kind of put all that fear away and decide, yeah, I want to do this for you, my baby. This is the world that I want you to grow up in.
Well, I tell you what, if that is accomplished in any form through Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip, I will have great joy. And I do think it's possible. Kids just see things that sometimes we as adults push past. And many of these places that are mentioned in the book, I had been to for years. I've led groups there for years. I'm supposed to be the leader and the expert, the guide in these places. And yet I found my youngest child teaching me. And maybe that's a gift as well for us as adults, as trusted adults and parents and guardians, is that there are some lessons that our best teachers are youth, are our children, and that we also have the capacity to learn from them.
You had something, Justina, that you wanted to ask Dr. Michael about our history and how we can preserve that.
Yes. So I grew up in, a childhood that didn't really necessarily accurately portray my history, which is really unfortunate because as a child, I didn't know that. I just assumed that what I was reading was the truth and that, why would my teachers lie to me? Why would my educators lie to me? And growing up, it's been really painful kind of discovering all of this, I think, purposely hidden history. It's not lost. It's purposely hidden. And I just wish that there were more active efforts to preserve and share our history accurately. And I just want to know, what are ways that you think that you have accurately shared and preserved history as well as a pastor, as a professor, and also as a parent? How have you assured that your children get an accurate representation of our triumphs and our successes as a collective community?
Well, I appreciate the question. Beyond creating this pilgrimage that takes persons throughout the Deep South to see this history and to connect with the participants in the movement, I've had an opportunity to do some things through my activism. One of the things that I would say most persons in the country know me concerning me is my role in bringing down Confederate monuments in the city of Dallas, which was not an easy feat by any means. Very few people know that the city of Dallas had the largest Ku Klux Klan chapter in America during the beginnings of the 20th century, that 1 out of every 3 eligible men in our city were members of the Klan. That's our reality. And in fact, when the dedication of the second Confederate monument in our city took place, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was there for that dedication, along with D.W. Griffin, whose movie, Birth of a Nation, really helped spark a rise in growth of the KKK. Well, we worked hard. We made sacrifices. We faced down members of the Klan today and neo-Confederates before those monuments. And we declared that we would not rest until we were able to bring those monuments down, that not another generation of young people in our community would live amid a lie, the lie of the lost cause, the lie of the Confederacy. A lot of people didn't think we could do it. There were a lot of people who shunned us for our efforts. Nasty things were said and written about us. But I'm grateful that for the first time since 1897 in the city of Dallas, Confederate monuments no longer stand. So one of the things we have to do is to even rid our spaces, our landscapes, of these historical lies, the lie of white supremacy that is encapsulated in these Confederate monuments. So that's one thing. I'm also honored recently to have been named the National Vice Chair of Foot Soldiers Park in Selma, Alabama, which is working to create a park, memorial, and education center in honor of those foot soldiers who gave so much for us in 1965 in the midst of the voting rights struggle. And we're working very diligently now to raise some money with partners and friends. We're very grateful that Harvard University has come on as a partner, and others are coming on to help us really create this space, this sacred space where so much was given, where in fact civil rights leaders were housed before participating in that struggle. And so again, that's one of the great honors of my life, to be a part of that work, to preserve that history for generations to come, in particular for our young people, so that they will know how precious the right to vote is, a right that unfortunately is still under attack today, and that they might be inspired to cast that vote when they have that opportunity.
That's really amazing. And I think it's also incredibly important, like you said, to assure that we have something to give to the next generation. In college right now, you mentioned D.W. Griffith. I actually learned about Oscar Micheaux, who I had not learned about literally until recently. He responded with D.W. Griffith's film with another film called Within Our Gates, which is a religious film, and it kind of follows I think it's like a religious dream that one of the protagonists has, and, you know, God speaks to him in the dream and heals him. And I think that being able to spread awareness about not only African American history and heritage and Black culture and all of the things that have to do with our history, obviously through education, but exploring all of those different avenues, like you said, like through our parks and through our recreational centers and through the things that our children interact with in our communities is incredibly important. And I think that with Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip, starting especially at home, is incredibly, paramount. My mom always told me all of the things that you learn, all of your behaviors, all of your mannerisms, and all of the things that you do when you step out of the house, you must learn those in the house. And so I think that reading a book like Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip will definitely kind of integrate and solidify those mannerisms so that children can go out and spread that knowledge and spread the truth, which is what needs to happen going forward, especially with all of the injustice that has occurred thus far in history.
No, I absolutely agree. And one of the things that we can all do, particularly if we're blessed to have elders in our home or in our family, is to simply have conversations with them and learn about our history through those who lived the experience. I'll never forget several Christmases ago, my mother-in-law's brother, we were at his home, and I was talking about the civil rights pilgrimage that I had just led. And he kind of casually came out of the kitchen and said, "Oh, yeah, I marched in the Selma to Montgomery March," to which everybody turned their heads on a swivel and said, "What? All these years?" And he said, "Yeah, I participated. I just never thought it was a big deal to share it." And, for the next, I can't think of how many hours, we're just sitting at his feet saying, "Tell us everything about the march and about your experience." You may not have someone in your home or someone in close proximity to you that participated in the march, but you might know someone who knows what it feels like to drink out of a black-only water fountain, who knows what it feels like to sit at the back of the bus. And I think hearing their story is paramount because it humanizes the experience. Sometimes the black and white photos and magazines and even the documentaries, as well put together as many of them are, there's still some distance there. But when you can actually have a conversation with someone and they can tell you about what it felt like to look through the window at a white family enjoying ice cream at the counter and knowing that you couldn't enjoy that same ice cream on a hot summer day, then you really begin to feel the indignity of all of the experience. It's not just the name calling. Yes, that's bad. It's not just the bombings. Of course, we know that's bad. But it was the daily human indignities where there's literally signs that are telling you you're not welcome. You're not worth our time. I think having those conversations is important because it helps us even appreciate what we do have accessible to us today. But I think it also causes us, again, to commit ourselves to secure the greater rights that are still beyond our grasp.
Dr. Michael, how can we help our kids and all kids recognize those signs of indignity that still exist in our, there may not be any whites only signs over a fountain, but there are lots of signs in our lives that just point out the fact that we aren't living equally. We went through this pandemic. We all went through it, but we didn't go through it in the same boat. Some people really struggled hard. How can we help our kids recognize those things and do more than just sit back and say, "Oh, that's really too bad"?
Jed, I've found, and not just from our children, but also children in our church and the many children across the country I've been able to engage over the last year with my last children's book, For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World. The amazing thing is that there is an awareness in this younger generation that I don't think we had in our generation. They know that things aren't quite right, even if they don't exactly know completely what's wrong. They know it's this. They know there's something better than this. I'm thinking of Liberty now when during the onset of the pandemic, as news began to break out about the death of Ahmaud Arbery, we're watching the news. And she says, "Dad, what was he doing?" I said, "Jogging." And she just sat back and thought about that. And she kind of came forward and she said, "He got killed for jogging?" I said, "That's all he was doing." Her kind of burrow, kind of scrunched up a little bit. And you could just look across her face thinking, that absolutely makes no sense. And I've seen it in so many children, again, across this past year, who have just, looked at things the way they are, the lies sometimes that they've heard spoken in the media, again, children locked away from their parents. And even though they're young, they know it's not right and know that there can be something better. And I think then that's where we come in, if you will, as trusted adults to continue the conversation about how things can be made better. So again, I think we have a generation of young people who are very aware. They have to be, because of all that has happened as they have come of age. And then I think our role and responsibility is to serve as guides to the best of our ability, give even deeper understanding to what is transpiring, but also always connecting to that understanding our history and our hope, that there's always been people who have worked in every generation to make things better, and that I believe we can do the same, that we believe we can do the same today.
Well, it is my sincere hope that everybody listening to this will not only check out Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip, but will make a commitment to themselves to work with our young people, to listen to them, and work together to make the world a better place for everyone. That the world that our forefathers promised us, the world that I think all of our religions have been pointing us to since the beginning of time. Speaking of pointing us to, could you point us to where we can find out more about you and your books, Dr. Michael?
Sure. Well, please connect with me on my website, which is simply michaelwwaters.com. We'd love to continue the conversation. And as they say, the books are available everywhere books are sold. But I would have you particularly pay attention to your local Black-owned bookstores, as well as your independent bookstores that you would purchase from those independent bookstores, Black-owned bookstores, and support those within your local community.
Absolutely. I love that Amazon can bring me toothpaste that my wife likes, but that's all they need to bring me. We can support our indie bookshops. They don't need to bring me any more. They don't need any more of my money. And we've had this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael, for telling us, sharing about Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip, giving us a lot to think about. And I also want to thank my amazing intern, Justina Thompson, for joining us as well.
Thank you.
It's been my delight. Thank you so much.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Kate DiCamillo, talk about kid-lit royalty. Kate DiCamillo returns to the Reading with Your Kids podcast to celebrate her brand new middle grade novel. It's an illustrated middle grade novel. It's called The Beatrice Prophecy. That's the next episode of the show. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Dr. Michael Waters. Please be sure to check out Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip. I also want to thank my incredible intern, Justina Thompson from Emerson College. Keep that name in your mind. She's going to be doing great things. We're so happy for having her intern with us last semester. Also want to thank my team, Alana Doherty, Fatima Khan, my current interns, Rory Grady and Michael Murphy. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.